Democrats really don't like President Trump's pick for national intelligence for some reason. Election fraud probes have officially been launched after the fiasco in California last week, and the White House says a deal with Iran is very real this time. It's Friday, June 12th, and this is news and commentary from America's Heartland. You're watching Heartlander News. Welcome into Heartlander News. I'm Chris Stigall. I don't know if you've been following the Act Blue CEO testimony or lack thereof in the last week. Jim Jordan sounded off on it.
Act Blue itself says they have 23,000 candidates and groups that use their site last year alone. And through that site, they raised almost $1.8 billion from 52 million contributors. And you allege, and others, that some of those contributions came from overseas. Now, lay it out. Prove it.
Well, yeah, it's not just Republicans who allege that. We've always suspected that. It's their board chairman who said up to $38 million looks like it came from foreign origin. So their board chairman said there's problems. All of their fraud prevention team either resigned, left because they were retaliated against, or were fired. We deposed all 5 of them. They all took the fifth. And maybe most importantly, Ms. Wallace Jones, when she responded to Congress, we had sent her a letter asking her questions about how they handled fraud and how they were stopping foreign contributions. Her response, their outside legal counsel said, you misled Congress. You might want to correct the record. It looks like you knowingly, and these are key terms, Bill, knowingly and willingly misled the Congress, which you can't, that's a crime in and of itself. So with all that fact pattern, if I was Ms. Wallace Jones, I'd have taken the fifth too, for goodness sakes. Your whole team took the fifth. Your outside counsel says you should correct the record. You misled Congress and you didn't. And now you're in front of Congress. Of course she's going to take the fifth.
If they take the fifth, how do you get the truth?
Well, the Justice Department's digging into this. They'll get to the truth. I mean, this is going to, I think, potentially wind up in court. Who knows but the Justice Department's investigating as well. We need to do our work under the Constitution, do our oversight, because we may need to change campaign finance laws to deal with what's going on at Act Blue. As you pointed out, this is the fundraising machine for the billions of dollars.
Yeah, the mask has slipped completely off the Democrat Party's dirty money machine, Act Blue. And their CEO, as you just heard there, Regina Wallace Jones, she sits before Congress this past week, pleads the fifth more than 20 times. She wouldn't answer a single direct question about foreign cash flooding Democrat campaigns, the lies they told in Congress in 2023, the gutted fraud protections, or the blatant smurfing of millions in fake micro donations. This was a legally necessary and calculated stonewall, as Jim Jordan said, by the woman running the largest small dollar fundraising platform for the entire dirty Democrat machine. And she's not alone. Earlier depositions saw 5 different Act Blue insiders invoke the fifth, some 146 times, in fact. They all refuse to answer even basic questions about how illegal foreign money makes its way into our elections. And we really all ought to stop and consider that. Act Blue brags about powering some grandmother's $5 donation. But in reality, it's a sophisticated conduit. It's allegedly been looking the other way on foreign passports, foreign IP addresses, red flags that any honest operation would otherwise shut down right away. And internal warnings were ignored too. Compliance teams and lawyers walked right out the door. And all the while, billions poured in to elect Democrats up and down the ballot. This is not a bug in the system, of course. This is the Democrat system. Act Blue functions as a profoundly illegal arm of the Democrat Party. They operate in the shadows. They undermine fair elections. They launder influence. And honest Americans are forbidden from this same kind of behavior. Foreign billionaires and hostile actors don't get to buy our democracy with suitcase money broken into thousands of fake $5 clicks. That's not small dollar grassroots. That's election interference dressed up as activism. And pleading the fifth is not a constitutional shield here. It's a flashing confession of guilt. when the questions cut straight to the heart of corruption. Every American who believes in clean elections should be outraged. This isn't just fraud. It's an organized effort to kill democracy in darkness, where the rules apply to Republicans, but the cash flows freely for Democrats, no matter where it comes from. Chairman Jordan, Steele, and Comer, they all have the receipts. Now it's time for consequences. Congress must refer this straight to the Department of Justice. There have to be indictments, there have to be prosecutions, there has to be asset seizures and freezes if necessary. Shut down the pipeline until it's cleaned up. We cannot and will not accept a two-tiered system where one party's criminal fundraising operation gets a free pass. The American people demand transparency and accountability and prison time for those who sold out our republic for power. Act Blue isn't too big to jail. No one should be too big to jail. And to that point, we turn to the DOJ launching multiple election fraud probes in California. The Justice Department defending its authority to ensure fair elections in California after it launched multiple election fraud investigations coupled with litigation over voter registration. This from the Daily Signal. California has long been known for liberal practices such as ballot harvesting with a universal mail-in voting system, allowing ballots to arrive a week after Election Day or more. No voter ID requirements, of course. The department's investigations into voter fraud in California are in line with the authority that they have, they say, the statutory authority to enforce our nation's election laws. The assistant U.S. attorney for the Central District of California posting on X days after the recent primary elections that they have launched fraud investigations and they would follow the evidence. Without commenting on any specific investigation, my office has multiple election fraud investigations underway. California takes a long time to count ballots, as you know, in most years, garnering significant attention, not to mention the outright and flagrant cheating, like paying homeless people. Hakeem Jeffries, El Jefe, as I like to call him, number 266, if you would here, please, Aaron. Hakeem Jeffries says that the homeless people who testified to a reporter that, yes, in fact, they took money, it's just a big right-wing conspiracy plot.
Earlier in the week, you told me that there is no election fraud happening in California and that anyone who questions the outcome of the election is a conspiracy theorist. However, there are now homeless people on Skid Row admitting they were bribed with cash, drugs, other incentives to vote Democrat in elections. Does that change your stance at all on whether or not these elections are rigged?
Listen, I'm unfamiliar with those reports, and I wouldn't be surprised if those are part of some far-right conspiracy theory being peddled on the internet to try to convince the American people that there's evidence of fraud in California.
So people speaking directly into a camera saying, yes, I was paid money to vote a certain way. People speaking directly into a camera, I was paid to vote a certain way. And he says it's part of a far-right conspiracy theory. Right. Even though we shared earlier in the week that statistically, the fact that all the late ballots that came in, 24,000 of them came in for this second place winner, this Rahman woman, and not a single one, not one vote came in for Spencer Pratt, which is a statistical impossibility, 1 in trillions, as was studied by the Washington Times. But sure, it's a right. I mean, it's gaslighting. You all understand this. We all understand it. And it's good. It's very, very good. The Department of Justice is looking into it. We'll get more into some work that the DOJ is doing soon. But I also want to turn to something pretty important this week, and that's the war in Iran, where just yesterday, President Trump says we have already reached a settlement, perhaps a real one. Now, Iran, as of this morning, is denying that, but the president says we're very, very close. After yesterday, he threatened to go all in. And he said, look, come to the table or we're going to bomb the hell out of you and we're going to seize Karg Island. And then he called it off yesterday and then announced we were really, really close to a deal. So this morning, Iran is saying that's not the case. But nevertheless, here's President Trump yesterday in discussing what is a potential final settlement.
Big day. I know you'll never be satisfied, but that's okay. That doesn't bother me at all. We just made a great settlement of the war with Iran, and we're going to be subject to finalization of documents, which should get done over the next few days. Probably have a signing maybe in Europe, and it's a great thing. Stock market's up 1,000 points. That means they like the deal. See, that means they like, if the market goes down, that means they don't like the deal. But it's been up, oil's dropped. Oil will start coming down to, I think, even lower than it was before. I said I was in Iowa. It was $1.85 a gallon. Big day.
So, yeah, President Trump saying it's a good day. President Trump says we're very, very close. And listen, one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're analyzing Donald Trump is assuming that he negotiates like a typical politician, which of course he does not. He negotiates like a businessman. So most politicians start with the deal they want, and then they begin making concessions to get there. Trump, on the other hand, starts with leverage. And that's consistently what we've been watching play out with Iran. Leverage. Listen carefully to what he's saying. His demands have not changed even a little bit. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, period, full stop. Iran cannot keep enriched uranium that can eventually become a weapon, period, full stop. The Strait of Hormuz must remain open to international shipping, period, full stop. And by the way, our moderate Arab partners are already creating new ways around the Strait of Hormuz as we speak. Anyway, President Trump's conditions about this whole thing have been remarkably consistent. What's changing, of course, is the pressure. And that is where Donald Trump operates far differently than most modern leaders. You know, when negotiations stall, most politicians begin looking for compromises. They start lowering the expectations. They begin searching for language that allows both sides to claim some kind of victory. Trump, to many people's frustration, actually does the opposite. He increases the pressure like he did yesterday. Why? Because he understands a simple truth. The side that needs the deal the most is usually the side that loses. So think about that. If Iran desperately needs relief from things like sanctions, which they do, and they desperately need economic breathing room, which they do, and they desperately need military pressure reduced, which they do, then why should Trump rush this thing? Why would he give away his leverage? Why would he negotiate against himself and the country? He wouldn't. And of course he doesn't. Instead, he keeps telling the world that a deal is available. It's close. Tomorrow, next week, anytime Iran wants one, we'll have a deal. All they have to do is meet the conditions. And folks, that's not stalling. That's leverage. The media often mistakes patience for indecision. It's not the same thing. Everybody wants the instant gratification in 2026, but that's not Trump. Trump appears perfectly comfortable allowing pressure to build while the other side decides whether continuing to resist is worth the cost. That takes discipline. It also takes confidence. Most politicians become terrified when negotiations drag on. They start worrying about the headlines. They worry about the polls. They worry about appearing unsuccessful. Trump's never seemed particularly interested in any of that, actually. He's interested in the outcome. That's why he walked away from bad deals in business. It's why he walks away from bad deals in his first term, and it's why he's willing to sit and wait it out now. Because ultimately the goal isn't an agreement. The goal is the right agreement. Those are very different things. What's happening in Iran isn't random. It's not emotional. It's not impulsive. What Trump is waging here is a pressure campaign designed to produce a very specific outcome: maximum leverage, maximum pressure, zero concessions. That's Trump. That's how he's negotiated for decades. And whether his critics like it or not, it's exactly how he's negotiating with Iran today. You know, Iran has spent 50 years learning how to exploit weakness, delay decisions, outlast Western politicians. What they're discovering now, though, is that Donald Trump is not particularly interested in playing by those rules. He's making them play by his instead. And that's pretty damn refreshing, if you ask me, from a commander-in-chief in the White House. So we'll continue to watch that here. The debate over FISA continues on Capitol Hill, and it has led to President Trump changing direction on who his next, although I don't know how likely it is that he's going to change his direction on this either. The House has rejected a short-term extension of Section 702 of FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And Democrats say the only way they will come on board and support it is if President Trump reverses course on his selection for Director of National Intelligence, Bill Pulte. They don't like this guy. And as such, it's pretty interesting. A standoff over whether President Trump's decision to install Bill Pulte as acting Director of National Intelligence has jeopardized what lawmakers in both parties consider one of the government's most important intelligence tools. The vast majority of House Democrats opposing the extension through July 2nd, along with a group of conservatives upset about a lack of reforms. The vote, 198 to 218. If Congress doesn't act, Section 702 lapses today, Friday, the 12th of June. Democrats have refused to back this extension of Section 702 unless Trump reverses his decision to name Pulte as DNI. Trump said Wednesday on Truth Social he wants Pulte, who Axios points out lacks national security experience, to execute the immediate and needed downsizing of the Office of Director of National Intelligence. So he believes Pulte is a hatchet man who can go in and gut the national intelligence apparatus because it has been, of course, weaponized for a very long time. Pulte is a tough guy, and Trump likes him a lot, wants him to move in and start to gut, slash, and cut DNI. Never a bad thing. Again, President Trump has been pretty consistent. We are at 50-year lows in federal employment. If you didn't know that, again, it's worth repeating. We have not seen government employment at this low a level in 50 years. And that's courtesy of Trump's agenda. Anyway, before Trump picked Pulte, GOP lawmakers were close to assembling a bipartisan coalition on this extension of FISA. Negotiations have been difficult, lawmakers struggling for months to bridge disagreements over surveillance reforms. 702, this section of FISA, feeds more than half of the president's daily briefing and has been credited with helping thwart terror plots and other national security threats. But if Congress does not renew this, intelligence agencies and telecommunications companies will face immediate legal uncertainty over what collection activities may continue. The result could be chaotic and largely untested period for intelligence community. Look, everybody knows that FISA has been abused. There is debate about whether this particular Section 702 is the same thing or not. The conservatives that I have talked to on Capitol Hill that are in objection to 702, what they want is more oversight of FISA. It isn't really that they even object to passing FISA. They believe in many ways it has been reformed to their satisfaction. What they don't believe has been dealt with are punishments for people that abuse it and duplicative processes for people who engage in surveilling you and me. So said another way, if I want to surveil Aaron, the producer of this show, and I work inside the FBI, I then would have to go to another intelligence chief or agency and make the case. Because, again, you get a bad actor inside the FBI, and he or she has the leverage to just immediately launch some kind of surveillance of a fellow American citizen without any kind of duplication process. That is a totally disinterested observer. I want to surveil Aaron. That means I need to call my next door neighbor who doesn't know Aaron at all and say, okay, Chris, why do you want to surveil Aaron? And I lay out a list of reasons why, and then they sign off on it too. And if for some reason it comes back on me that I'm surveilling Aaron because I'm mad at him for something he did to me in college, well, not only am I going to pay a very, very stiff penalty for it, but so too would the individual who would have to vet my rationale for surveilling Aaron. Those are some of the reforms. I'm oversimplifying it. There are others, but that's one of the things that many House conservatives are saying they want to see. President Trump is saying, look, this thing has benefited us a lot. I know it's been abused. Nobody knows how it's been weaponized more than me. FISA was weaponized against me and my team more greatly than anybody else, and he's right to say so. He's kind of telling House conservatives now, trust me, we're not going to abuse it the same way. I don't think he will, and I think it's fair to say trust him. But the problem, of course, is President Trump will only be around for another 2.5 years, and then there's going to be a new administration, and we know how it was weaponized. And so the House Republicans are trying to make this pretty ironclad, with teeth and tough, so that if we're going to talk about the severity of surveilling American citizens, we got to be deadly serious that we know why we're doing it and that appropriate oversight is being done to make sure it isn't abused again. So it's a big deal. President Trump, meanwhile, said he will nominate a guy called Jay Clayton as Director of National Intelligence, hours after objections by House Democrats to the acting director, Bill Pulte. So what does this mean? Clayton is the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and is the former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. He'll have to be confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence by the Senate. The Senate is moving quickly on the nomination. The Select Committee on Intelligence Thursday announced confirmation for Clayton, the hearing on June 17th, which is a pretty rapid pace. Trump's surprise announcement came after more than a week of controversy surrounding Pulte. So what does this tell us? This tells us, again, going back to leverage, the Democrats, unfortunately, because President Trump and his security team say, look, I want FISA. I need it now. House Republicans say, we need reforms. Trump says, we don't have the time to wait. This is too critically important. House Republicans said, we're not rushing this. House Democrats said, okay, you want your FISA extension? We'll give it to you, but you got to get rid of Pulte. This is frustrating, folks, because I know what you're thinking, and I know horse trading in politics is frustrating. President Trump likes Pulte. He liked the idea that he was going to go in and gut national intelligence. It looks like Trump has changed his mind on that, and it looks like he's changed his mind because he needs these FISA provisions enacted, extended for their intelligence needs. And it appears that some House Republicans are not going to give him that today. And so he's now, look, this is my basic reading of it. I could be wrong, but it looks like maybe now he's trying to get some Democrats to peel back and help advance the FISA extension by taking Pulte out of the running. That tells me that Bill Pulte was uniquely someone that the Democrats feared and didn't like, which kind of bums me out, because if the Democrats really, really, really oppose somebody taking a post, generally that means as a conservative, I want them at that post. At least that's what I find. Speaking of Democrats who don't want someone at a post, or at least are pretending they're pretending they do, but we know that they don't. Chris Coons, Delaware Senator Chris Coons, who has always pretended to be a great moderate. Give me number 261 here, Aaron. They're still out there trying to spin, deflect, and explain Graham Plattner. This is going to be one to watch straight through November. They're claiming this guy has just never been more popular in Maine. They sure don't sound very convincing.
I know Susan Collins. I've worked with her, and I understand and respect why the voters of Maine have chosen someone who is an outspoken, forceful progressive, someone who is a combat veteran and brings a new direction for the state of Maine if he were to be elected. But I've had real concerns about his tattoo and his story about what he thought or didn't think about this Nazi-affiliated tattoo and some of the allegations about his personal conduct. At the end of the day, I think the voters of Maine made it pretty clear that they wanted national Democrats to stay out of their primary and make up their own minds. They pushed back on Janet Mills, I think, because Democrats in Maine perceived her as having been supported by the National Democratic Party. So I think I should stay out of Maine politics and focus on my own state and my own region. I know Susan Collins. I've worked with her.
Classic deflection. I'm going to stay out of Maine politics. Sure. I have nothing to say about the guy with the Nazi tattoo. I'm just going to stay focused here in Delaware. That's the good moderate Senator Chris Coons, who, again, Susan Collins and a guy like Chris Coons, they're thick as thieves. I'm no fan of Collins, but Chris Coons has probably had great relationships for many years with Susan Collins. But again, Chris Coons is also the same guy who walked the plank for that stupid old man we were pretending was president, that shell of a human being, that husk called Joe Biden. Chris Coons was running around the country telling us that he was fine and never better and shipshape and sterling and cognitively sharp as a tack. So Coons is one of those guys who's uniquely disingenuous, playing the moderate. Well, I have some concerns, but I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to stay in whatever. The Democrats are telling us who they are. From the Nazi tattoo to impeachment. They're promising they get control again. If they get the House, that's exactly where they want to go first. They want to go impeachment. Here's Jamie Raskin promising this is the business of the country if they get control. They elect their Nazi in Maine. They're going to blow up the filibuster. They take control of the House. They're going to impeach Donald Trump. That's all they want to do. That's all they want to achieve. Here's Raskin admitting as much.
Is impeachment on the table for you?
Again, everything's on the table. Nothing is off the table. We have a number of different mechanisms for checking the corruption and lawlessness that have overtaken our country. Nobody on our side is afraid of impeachment. It is not a taboo, but we also know it's not a panacea, and it is a fetish for nobody. It is one more tool in the toolkit, and we will use it if we need to use it.
Is impeachment.
Right. I don't know about you, and I know John Cornyn's in the New York Times, the sore loser that Cornyn is being there in Texas. He's saying, Trump's going to have a miserable last 2 years. John Cornyn is out there already basically cheering on the Democrats, no surprise, and telling us that Donald Trump is going to have a Democrat Congress and, he's going to have hell to pay for the next 2 years. Well, that's up to you. That's largely going to be up to the American voter whether the Democrats are handed the keys again. And I'm not terribly convinced. I know there are a lot of people suggesting now that even the Senate is going to fall to Democrats. Look, a lot can happen between now and November, but I'm still dubious of that claim. Here again, what are the Democrats' priorities? Let's listen to a couple of them. We haven't heard from the good representative of Massachusetts, Ayanna Pressley, in a while. The talk of reparations is back. That's another one. Anybody in the mood for this? This is another thing. Along with blowing up the filibuster in the Senate, packing the Supreme Court, making Puerto Rico and D.C. states. How about reparations talk, impeachment? Yeah, it's all back. Should they win this fall?
But we are here. And so we must work towards repair. This means reparative justice, like advancing H.R. 40 to develop reparations proposals. And as the lead House sponsor, I commit to advancing this bill alongside my movement siblings in the broader work for repair, truth, and healing. But let me be clear. This is not a movement or an appeal for benevolence or charity. This is a movement to demand redress, to right wrongs, to compensate for the harm and loss that we have experienced.
What is that cadence? What is that performative accent? Why do they speak like that? What is that? Human beings don't speak that way. Anyway, that's what Ayanna Pressley promises. So does Summer Lee, another Democrat, who says not only do they want reparations, but Black Americans should just stop participating unless they get it. Huh? You explain that to me? Black Americans should just stop participating in democracy altogether if they don't get reparations?
Psychological warfare with us. They are hell-bent on beating us down to our face and then telling us that, we're the ones who are crazy. And we got to fight back against this. So you know what? I have just not engaged in that topic of them trying to give insurrectionists some dollars, because we got to control the things that we can control. And they want Black folks to feel like they're poking, like they're knocking the wind out of us, right? That's what they need us to feel that way. Because if we feel empowered, if we feel like we have even a tiny bit of momentum, then they know that we have enough power to do damage positive damage, good trouble damage, or whatever.
Good trouble. That's it.
Good trouble. But yeah, it's absurd. And that's what they do, because again, they're trying to disenfranchise you. Because if you believe that you're never going to get reparations from this system, then you tap out. And you don't just tap out of the conversation, you tap out of the system. You don't want to vote anymore. You don't participate anymore. And they know that that's how they don't just control Congress. That's how they can get your school boards, your board of supervisors. They want us that far out of the system. So right now, we fight for reparations because it's owed us. It is owed us. So we're not going to back down on that one way or another. I'm not shocked that my colleagues are not on it, that Democratic colleagues aren't on it. Again, there is a level of comfort in this building that sustains people. And I know that the people who don't want reparations back a lot of my colleagues, Democrat and otherwise. So no, I'm not shocked. But it is why we have to keep people on the outside encouraged. So we have to, it's not that we have to cancel out the news when they're doing shit like that. We can't cancel out the news. Like, we got to live in reality. But we have to counterbalance that with our plan, our organizing plan, with how we're going to build this coalition, who we're working with to move the needle on this. And I think that our time is really well spent there.
I have never heard such gibberish in all my life. If Black Americans are disenfranchised or feel they don't have a voice, it's because people like that woman claim to represent them. And what is she promising? What good is she promising to deliver? What organizational principles is she promising to improve? Is she promising to improve? Nothing. She's offering nothing. She says, I don't know, a check. That's effectively all she aspires for Black Americans, is a check. Not to better their lives, not to improve their standard of living, not to make housing more affordable, not to make anything more affordable, not to make life better. She just wants a check cut if your skin is a certain hue. It's pretty insulting. And of course, most know it. So do Black Americans. That's why a record number of them voted for President Trump. And frankly, they're falling off the Democrat bandwagon because they know, after all these decades of promises, empty promises like things like reparations, they've done nothing to improve or make the lives of Black Americans at all better. And by the way, they see the likes of people like Ilhan Omar, one of the worst, not even American. And now probably overseeing, and maybe I'll just say, this is my editorial comment, not that I have this on any kind of fact, but you do get the sense, don't you, that it wouldn't surprise you if she's hip deep in this fraud scandal, the Somali Medicare fraud scandal. She's become an awfully wealthy person with absolutely no justification for becoming wealthy, no job, no position, no credibility to suggest she would become wealthy in any other way since she's been in Congress, and yet she has become very wealthy. President Trump addressing Ilhan Omar yesterday in the Oval Office. Give me number 271 here, Aaron.
You have the woman who married her brother. She came in and married her brother. Isn't that wonderful? And then she talks about the Constitution of the United States. She comes from Somalia. They don't have constitutions in Somalia. They don't have police. They don't have it. All they have is people that run around shooting each other. And then she comes and tells us how to run our country. I don't like it. These people don't like it. I can tell you. I think I can speak for you. Yeah. She comes in, Ilhan Omar. She comes in. She tells us how to run the United States of America. And she comes from a place without anything, probably among the worst countries in the world. And she says, the Constitution of the United States protects me. She shouldn't be protected. She honestly should be thrown out of the country. She's corrupt. And most of the people that came in are corrupt, and the whole voting system is corrupt in Minnesota. I won Minnesota 3 times, easily. I won almost every county, but they didn't give it to me. It's a corrupt system, very corrupt state. The governor is terrible. The attorney general is terrible. They're all very corrupt people. Yeah.
Corrupt indeed. And more of the same if Democrats are successful this fall. Speaking of the Democrats, as we approach the nation's 250th birthday, Gallup has already released the numbers that say only 1 in 5 Democrats even say out loud that they're proud to be an American. Well, now officials from Connecticut, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Oregon aren't going to officially send delegations to the 16-day event on the National Mall. This from Just the News. Musical acts are not the only ones shying away from President Trump's event-filled celebration of America's 250th birthday. Officials from Connecticut, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Oregon aren't officially sending delegations to the 16-day event. With 2 weeks left before the event opens June 25th, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Washington have also not committed to sending delegates. Freedom 250, an event the Trump administration began organizing last year, will feature a fair, an ultimate fighting championship match, and an IndyCar race. Rachel Reisner, spokesperson for Freedom 250, said that all 50 states and U.S. territories will be represented in some way at the event, whether that be the governor's office, a tourism board, or company based in the state. So Democrats refusing to participate in the celebration of the nation's 250th birthday because of who the president is. Very patriotic. Meanwhile, a massive 8647 message has been carved into the grounds of Washington, D.C.'s National Mall, drawing attention of federal authorities and reviving controversy surrounding the anti-Trump slogan that's already landed former Federal Bureau of Investigation Director James Comey in legal trouble. Authorities responding yesterday after a giant 8647 marking was discovered etched into the grass near the World War II memorial. Aaron, have you seen this? I know you live not terribly far from this. Has this made news there locally? I haven't actually seen the video. You seen anything about this?
Actually, I was just hearing it for the first time from you.
Well, thank you very
news.
much. Look at that. Breaking news here. A local photojournalist named Andrew Leiden observed the message from an aerial perspective. I don't know. Maybe you can find it out there on X or something, Aaron, if you see the video. But there's apparently an aerial photo from a guy named Andrew Leiden, Leyden, where the numbers are clearly visible from above. The phrase 8647 has become a politically charged anti-Trump slogan. 86 commonly understood as slang for getting rid of, removing, or killing an item from the menu, originally used by industry staff. Meanwhile, 47, of course, refers to Donald Trump. We all understand that. The slogan gaining national attention when James Comey spelled it in seashells on the beach.
I have the Fox News segment here.
Oh, we have this Fox News. Okay, here's a little bit of Fox News covering it, just so you can see what we're talking about here. I haven't seen it myself, so here we go.
Police say that this large 8647 was discovered around 11:30 yesterday afternoon on the west side of the Washington Monument. The anti-Trump sequence has emerged just as the National Mall is preparing for an influx of visitors for Sunday's UFC match and the president's
That's
birthday.
weird. Aaron, can you rewind that a little bit? That's go back to that overhead shot. I just want to see the picture of it because looking at it there, I'm not sure how that was even achieved, and the seven's not very clear. But here's the other thing, however they did that, how do you think that was done? Somebody pouring something? I'm looking at the picture of it right now. How do you think that was
probably the aliens that do crop circles?
But I don't understand. Did you pour some kind of weed killer? And by the way, who was allowed to do that for how long? You don't do that quickly, I wouldn't guess. Was that done overnight? I have many, many questions about this. Of course, they'll cede over it quickly. But anyway, I'm sure James Comey will say it's nothing. Nevertheless, so that's the Democrats in a nutshell. That's the kind of stuff you have to look forward to in November should they take power again. Let's get to some good news, because there is actually plenty of good news today. Melania Trump has unveiled a new savings account for foster care youth powered by Trump accounts, something that the president, I don't believe, gets nearly enough credit for, and I think is one of the more remarkable things to happen in this administration in the last year. First Lady Melania Trump has announced new savings avenues for youth in foster care, Foster the Future accounts. Today, we're adding another important layer to the Treasury Department's foundation of economic stewardship. She said for the first time, children in foster care will have access to a dedicated savings and investment vehicle. The accounts, dedicated federal savings and investment conduit designed for youth in the foster care system, stem from Mrs. Trump's Fostering the Future brainchild. America can offer services, help the protection, but real freedom means being able to make independent choices about your own future. So here's how it works. Fostering the Future accounts are powered by Trump accounts, Trump's newly introduced investment vehicle, designed to build long-term financial security for American children that includes a $1,000 seed deposit from the Treasury Department for eligible kids. You should know about this if you don't, that if your children are of a certain age, and Aaron, I think your son qualifies for a Trump account. Have you looked into this yet? Do you know about Trump accounts?
Yeah, I got prompted when I filed my taxes if I wanted to sign him up for it, and I said, yes, please.
Excellent.
So I should be getting an email from the IRS eventually to like set up the online access and stuff.
I love this. Again, if you regularly contribute to this thing and it sits untouched, tax-free, I think you can contribute something like up to $5,000 a year as a family to the Trump account for your newborn. And then it's tiered, I think, up to age 5 or something. So if you have a toddler, it still applies. Maybe you don't get the full $1,000, but if you have a baby during the Trump era here, I have a friend, for instance, who he and his wife just had a baby. They got the full $1,000 deposit. It is a donated. Who was the guy? Now I'm trying to remember the guy who donated the funds, the big money guy that donated the seed money on this thing. But anyway, you get a $1,000 deposit from Treasury in this untouchable account, and it sits there. And if families wish, they can continue to contribute. And what I loved about this, it was brilliant from the very beginning. Treasury Secretary Bessent, as well as Donald Trump, they want to teach people about the goodness of the free market and of compound interest and how much better it can be for all of us, including your children and their future, if you allow regular deposits to sit and grow compound interest in the free market. It is always going to be a better system for growth than waiting around at the end of the Social Security non-existent rainbow, which, by the way, again, projected to run out of money in the next few years, the Social Security Trust Fund. So you're talking about kids, babies who will get this $1,000 seed money. And if you regularly contribute, what I think the law allows is $5,000 a year. You're talking about, if you do nothing else, a child by the age of 18, I think the math was at a regular return of, I don't even remember what the percentage was, but it wasn't much. You're talking about a $200,000 account roughly for a kid at 18 years of age. So a 6-figure account for sure, just sitting there waiting for a kid at 18. If you do nothing but regularly contribute and let it sit there and grow. And if they don't, I think they can use it. I don't know if it's a down payment on a first home. There were, I don't remember all the stipulations around it, but it wasn't just like free money for their use. I think it had to be for education, or a home purchase or something like that. There were designated uses for it too. It wasn't just Yahtzee, you get the money. Anyway, it's worth looking into if you haven't heard about it and you don't know about it. Trump accounts. Look them up at the Treasury Department. Boy, if I had kids now, I'd be jumping all over this. It's free money to you, and it will only grow and be great for your kids' future. And now Mrs. Trump says we're going to do this for foster kids too. That's a real positive. Gallup has released some new numbers that say record few Americans find transgenderism, death penalty, and animal testing morally acceptable. I thought this interesting. Adults who view transgenderism as morally acceptable fell to record lows. The research firm found, Gallup did, just 38% of surveyed adults approve the morality of changing genders. Gallup noted the moral standing of an additional 5 out of the 20 behaviors measured in the questionnaire fell significantly in the past year. 83% of adults professed belief in the ethics of birth control, 58% in having a baby outside of marriage, 57% in gambling, 35% in sex between teenagers, 27% in cloning animals. Isn't that interesting? Birth control, babies outside of marriage, and gambling all have moral standing, with well over half to upwards of nearly 80% of adults professing the belief in the ethics of birth control. 35% say it is morally acceptable sex between teenagers. But 27%, only 27% are comfortable with cloning animals. Isn't that strange? Like, all those things I listed, and again, I'm not here to really give you a moral sermon today, but I am here to say that I think it's very interesting that cloning animals is on this list the most objectionable to Gallup survey recipients. Over the past 2 decades, Americans have grown generally more accepting of most of the behaviors measured by Gallup, which include those associated with sex, marriage, and certain medical and end-of-life issues. However, this trend toward more permissive attitudes is largely plateaued or pulled back, though acceptance levels on most behaviors remain higher than they were 25 years ago. For instance, majorities of 57 to 89% described 8 behaviors as morally wrong in the survey. Here's what they describe as morally wrong: suicide, polygamy, pornography, extramarital affairs, cloning humans, cloning animals, sex between teens, and changing one's gender. So that's good news. Views on abortion, animal testing, physician suicide, more split. 49% of adults viewed abortion as morally acceptable. That's a 50-50 proposition. However, that is down from a high of 54%. Amen. And that's because technology has advanced and we are now seeing, I think, more clearly what a baby is and when a human life begins. The science is there. And again, I think people are drawing closer to the Lord as well. I think people are drawing closer to the faith. I think people are diving into the Word of God again. I think that leads to a lot of this too. Let's see. The remaining 10% said they didn't know, or it depends on the situation. Self-identified Democrats significantly likelier than Republicans to find abortion, porn, teenage sex, assisted suicide, premarital sex, gender transitions, LGBTQ relationships, embryonic stem cell research, and having a baby out of wedlock, all morally acceptable. So there you go. Boy, if ever there was a Democrat message in this Gallup poll, that's it. Let me read this paragraph to you one more time. Self-identified Democrats significantly likelier than Republicans to find abortion, pornography, teenage sex, assisted suicide, premarital sex, gender transitions, LGBTQ relationships, embryonic stem cell research, and having a baby out of wedlock morally acceptable. I mean, and having the baby out of wedlock, that's if they don't want to kill it. I mean, I don't think most Democrats would want to have a baby out of wedlock. They would just want to kill it instead because that's the more convenient way. So that's, again, I think that's an interesting Gallup poll to see where the country has moved and what they deem morally acceptable and what they haven't. Democrats, don't you go changing. Amazing. Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley wants prosecutions on Arctic frost accountability. Amen. This is not something that should be dropped either. Grassley says his panel this year will call on former special counsel Jack Smith, that loathsome little toad that looks like he's been pulled from someone's drain. That's the only way I can describe him. Just a mangy looking guy. Like if you saw the dog on the street, you'd think it was time to put it down. But anyway, Jack Smith said, Chuck Grassley said Jack Smith is going to be called to testify on Arctic frost. The Iowa Republican welcomes more prosecutions involving Arctic frost, including the House moving forward on the potential impeachment of James Boasberg. Good. There needs to be some House impeachments of judges. An Obama appointee who approved gag orders for subpoenas in the probe. And if you don't know what I'm talking about here, just so you understand, Arctic frost was the surveillance of elected members of the United States Congress, unbeknownst to them. And Jack Smith managed to get a hold of Verizon and AT&T, I believe, maybe one other. I'm not sure if it was all of the bigs or not. I think AT&T refused, actually, to participate in this. But I know Verizon not only handed over phone records to Jack Smith of senators on Capitol Hill, he was investigating their phone conversations between Trump and them. So Jack Smith not only forced, I think, Verizon to hand over that phone data, he then threatened them and said that they had better not tell members of Congress that they were focus of an investigation or else. And Boasberg granted the gag order. Judge Boasberg told these people that Jack Smith had the right to tell them at Verizon, don't share, that they're being spied on. Now, it is the law. It is the law that members of Congress or any of us, again, back to the FISA thing, this is the abuse stuff I'm talking about, people in power who abuse their authority. Even your elected officials in the Senate and the House being spied on, the Republicans, and Jack Smith told companies, don't you tell or you're going to be in trouble. Companies have a legal right to tell you if the government has asked for your phone data. So Arctic frost absolutely needs to be investigated. I hope we see impeachment from Judge Boasberg. That's one of the things House Republicans could well energize the electorate over. If House Republicans start getting into the business of accountability, the Republic will respond. I believe that. But they need to feel like their elected representatives are actually listening and are as pissed off as they are and really want accountability. This would go a long way, Republicans. So I commend you. I hope you're going to do it. The Cleveland Clinic has terminated child sex change procedures, and they've committed funding for detransition care. This is another victory. The Cleveland Clinic agreeing to provide detransition care and not perform sex-rejecting procedures on minors, said the Department of Justice. The Cleveland Clinic entered into a decades-long commitment to not perform these procedures on minors. As part of the resolution, Cleveland Clinic committed to shell out $2 million for detransitioners' restorative care, regardless of their insured status or ability to pay. Right on. The Department of Justice is steadfastly committed to protecting America's children, said the Associate Attorney General Stanley Woodward. Just as the resolution with Texas Children's Hospital, today's resolution with Cleveland Clinic furthers that commitment and puts these providers on notice that this department will vigorously enforce federal law when children are put at risk. Good. This is one of the best outcomes, in my view, of the Trump administration, is to seek and punish anyone who's invested in this sick, multi-billion-dollar business of getting a hold of minor children in this country and transitioning them. Anyone. I would like to see people in jail for it, frankly. But, okay, for now, I'll take DOJ basically forcing restitution. Millions of dollars they're going to have to pay out of their own pocket to detransition these kids who've been convinced to undergo the knife or take chemical castration drugs or what have you. Barbarism. Child abuse of the worst order. And it was facilitated by medical places like Texas Children's and the Cleveland Clinic and other children's hospitals around the country. That's Frankenstein's monster stuff. As a culture, as a country, it is unfathomable to me that we're here. I mean, it's, you go back to the Gallup poll and the morality thing. Like, it's amazing that probably there are more Democrats in this country that find cloning an animal more morally objectionable than trying to trans a minor. There's some dark and mentally sick stuff going on in the country, and you ultimately can't legislate darkness out. That's something we're going to have to pray out on bended knee. But anyway, it's a win now for the Department of Justice, and I'm glad to see it. Also Thursday, speaking of DOJ, they had a roundtable discussion on the weaponization of against parents in schools, in which officials exposed the anti-MAGA task force that Joe Biden led when he was in control of DOJ and FBI. Glenn Youngkin, the former governor of Virginia, said this is an insidious network that works every day to separate children from their parents. Youngkin, whose state of Virginia, particularly Loudoun County, was under the national spotlight for parental rights, bemoaned the Biden administration's lack of willingness to collaborate on investigative efforts, but said, for one beautiful year, I had an administration that worked with me, speaking of President Trump's administration. Todd Blanche opened the hearing, voicing dire concerns about the systemic abuse by the Biden administration, as well as the Biden DOJ and the National School Board Association during the COVID pandemic. He reflected on COVID-19 policies that reportedly harmed children during the pandemic and said that when parents voiced concerns about these issues, they were targeted and censored, including a letter sent by the National School Board Association, whatever the hell that is, to Biden, stating that perceived threats against school officials over policy concerns could be the equivalent of a form of domestic terrorism. Parents were raising concerns as secret gender support plans, technology to conceal changes to their name, gender or pronouns from parents, and secret abortion services for minors, said Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education. Biden's FBI was also implicated in the allegations of weaponization. Under Chris Wray, originally nominated by Donald Trump way back when, Rampant claims that the Bureau, often in coordination with the Department of Justice, selectively targeted conservatives, pro-life advocates, and concerned parents through investigations and raids while downplaying or reprioritizing similar scrutiny of left-leaning groups. This is a hugely important moment. Again, much like Arctic frost, much like these children's hospitals and this transing stuff, this is equally important. The looking under the hood at election interference and fraud out in California, huge for parents and families. Investigating the weaponization of government against parents and against schools and school boards who are trying to drive a wedge in between families and their children and using schools to do it. This is the accountability that Republicans are going to have to display if they stand a shot at winning this fall. And I'm thrilled. This guy Blanche, he's the real deal, it appears. It's a shame, quite frankly, he wasn't AG from the jump, but there's real movement here now. And that's a very, very good thing. One last thing that'll make you smile as we close out today. Marco Rubio, talking about as we approach the 250th anniversary of this country. Here's Marco Rubio, as only he can, talking about the great American ideal and from where it comes, which I think is an important thing to continue to remember as we approach this 250th anniversary. Take a listen.
Why UFC? We had this deal with the NFL too, but why UFC? So I have a couple reasons why that I think is very powerful. Here's the first. The first is America, and the ideal behind America is the impossible. That someone tells you can't do that, or that's never going to happen. The whole idea of America is audacious. The very idea that America, that you could have a country where founded on the principle that your rights come not from your government or from your leaders, your rights come from your creator, was an audacious idea. No one else believed that at the world at that time. And that's the foundation. But then beyond that, everything we've done since then as a nation, time and again, how can you achieve some of the things, we're going to put a man on the moon. When President Kennedy announced that we were going to put a man on the moon and return him safely to the earth, no one thought that was possible, and we did it. We are a nation founded on doing what no one else dared to do and no one else aspired to do. And at some level, that's what this whole company, what UFC has been. You see, mixed martial arts is not new. It's been around now for about 30 years, I would say, maybe 35, but there were no rules. There was no structure. I remember the early fights. I used to watch them back in the day, and it was, you could get like a 170-pound Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy fighting a 250-pound heavyweight who was a striker. I was like, how do you put this? The rules weren't clarified. And Dana and the people around him had a vision, and that is to create a structure around this company, to give it rules, to define it by weight class, to structure the events, and it attracted some of the best athletes in the world. And what you've built now is this global company that not so long ago would have seemed impossible. Back in the day when boxing commissions, that's what they're called, or athletic commissions, were a little bit reluctant to give you permits to stage these fights or put on these events, or when no one knew what it was, you were able to plow through that. And today you have one of the most recognizable American sports brands on the planet. And in and of itself, I think reflects so much the American spirit is reflected in this American company. Here's the second point. It truly is the United Nations of fighting. If you think about the number of countries that are represented, and I think that roster will continue to grow, Lawrence, I really do. I think the number of people and champions you're going to get from around the world will continue to be added. And I can tell you this is true, and I can tell you about your global reach because the president, and I have another job and spend a lot of time at the White House, the number of foreign leaders that want to come to this is unbelievable. It's to the point where we may have a diplomatic crisis because it's like, we can't bring everybody. And so they follow, and some of them don't even have a fighter in the fight from their country.
I love it. I absolutely love it. This UFC thing to the White House, it's actually emblematic of something greater. Only Marco Rubio can take something like the UFC and explain its global significance and why it really represents American exceptionalism. And the fact that it drives the American left so crazy. I do think this UFC fight, this claw that's sitting on the lawn of the White House, it is going to attract more attention. President Trump proving yet again he is the ultimate showman. The left is just mad that they don't have a showman. They don't have someone who can call attention to their efforts quite like he can. I mean, think about these, we just showed you that lame preacher lilt delivery from Ayanna Pressley. That's the best they've got. Some stupid podium standing out in front of Capitol Hill with their preacher lilt. He's building a claw to host one of the most popular global sporting events right there on the White House lawn for all to see. It's pretty good stuff. And that's going to do it for us today from America's Heartland. Be sure to keep up to date on all the latest news throughout the week. For an honest, straightforward approach, it's heartlandernews.com. And be sure to subscribe right here to Heartlander News on YouTube. Give us a like, comment too, if you're so inclined. We're sure glad to have you along. Hope to see you right here next time on Heartlander News.